Hello and welcome to the third video in the S.T.A.L.K.E.R mod making tutorial series. In this video we're going to cover asset replacement mods. We're going to replace a texture, we're going to modify the dog barking sounds, and then finally we'll make a mod that combines both audio and texture editing. We'll also install some new tools. This will be the first where we work with the actual Unreal Engine editor. And then also for audio, we're going to download and set up Wwise so that we can actually convert our audio files into the format that the game is going to require. And here's a sneak peek of the mod that we're going to make at the end of this video.
How do you like that? You're not on my good side!
So yeah, we're going to tank the overall quality of mods for S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 by introducing this hot garbage into the wild. And hopefully get a laugh out of the 5 people who still remember the Macho Dragons mod from Skyrim. So without further ado, let's install the Unreal Engine. So the first step in installing the Unreal Engine is to download the Epic Games launcher. You can start off by going to the S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 Wiki. In the S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 Creating Mods page, at the very bottom we have the Unreal Editor setup. You can click on this link to install the Epic Games launcher, downloads, run it, and then whenever it is actually installed, most likely this is what you'll see. So what you're going to want to do is click on Unreal Engine and then click on Library. You probably don't see these 3 blue squares here. In fact, you probably don't even see this gray one either. What you're most likely going to see the first time you open this is you're going to have nothing in this section. And you want to click on this yellow button right here. And in this gray card that pops up, you're going to click this number, this version number, and you're going to choose 5.1.1. And that's important. Now you can see I already have it installed. But once you click on whatever version you want, in this case for S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, it's 5.1.1. You're going to click on Install and then verify its install folder where you want to install, and then click Install. Now, this will take a long time. Be patient. You get this done whenever you have, 30 minutes to an hour to spare, depending on your internet connection speed. But since I already have Unreal Engine 5.1.1 installed, I'm not going to do this. Whenever it is done, go ahead and click on Launch. Take a little bit to open the first time. And when you see this, we're going to create a new project that's going to contain our mod code. And we should only really ever have to create 1 project per game. What I recommend, and although you can take a different path here, so go ahead and make sure Games is selected, and then click on First Person. You can leave all these settings over here to the right, but just ensure that it's Blueprint. What does matter, however, is this project name down here. So you want to call this the name of the game project for the game you're trying to mod for. For S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, that is S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. So it's capital S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 with no spaces, no underscores. For different games, you can find that out by going to the game install directory and finding the parent folder for wherever you see the content folder. So if you put your packs into content packs, it's whatever the parent folder is of content. So for S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, it's this right here, verbatim. We're going to create our project. And again, the first time we start this, it'll take a little while, depending on the speed of your CPU and your GPU. And now we're actually in an Unreal Engine project. We can mess around with a bunch of stuff in here, but for now, let's just focus on ensuring that this particular project is set up to play nice with S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. So the first thing we want to change is we want to go up here to the upper right and then select Project Settings. And under Project Settings, if we click on Packaging, the option we want to change from the default is this option right here for Generate Chunks. We want to set that to True. And there's one more setting we want to change here, and that's you just type in cook everything. It should pop up. There we go. Cook everything in the project content directory. There's a reason we're doing this, and I will get into that later. But for now, we just know that that needs to be selected in order for our packaging to work correctly the way I will suggest that you will do it. We also, in order to make building our mods a little bit more intuitive, we can tell it that we only want to build mods for Windows. We're not going to be making mods for Stalker 2 on any of these other platforms because Stalker 2 doesn't work on any of these other platforms. So there's no reason for us to see these as options. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to unselect all platforms and then uncheck everything except for the bottom one, which is Windows. The last thing that we're going to need for doing textures, we're going to need to enable something. Stalker 2 uses a texture type called virtual textures, which is not enabled by default in Unreal Engine project. So we're going to go ahead and search virtual texture. Well, I think I got to go to all settings first. There we go. So under virtual textures, enable virtual texture support. We're going to say yes. One last thing I am not 100% sure if it has any effect on the game or not, or excuse me, on making mods for the game or not, is this project ID that gets automatically generated. This is unique to you, has nothing to do with the game. Invalidate that, just set it to all zeros. So again, not sure whether this makes a difference or not, but I just feel a lot more comfortable knowing that it's set to all zeros instead of a number that doesn't mean anything at all. And then once we make all these changes, it'll ask us to restart the Unreal Engine editor. Go ahead and do that. And it will take a little bit to recompile the shaders. But once that is done, go ahead and close your project. One note, I know we haven't really created anything yet within our actual project, but at the very bottom right, you're going to see this either all saved or 1 or 2 or 3 unsaved. Unreal Engine typically is going to save a lot of things for you, so you don't really have to go in and implicitly tell it to save constantly. But if you ever see in the bottom right-hand corner that it doesn't say all saved, just go ahead and either use the Control S for save shortcut or just save current level, save all. So as long as we see this all saved, we can always close a project without any consequences. So now let's go ahead and install Wwise, which we're going to need to mess around with and edit audio. So from the Stalker 2 Creating Mods Wiki, go down to Recommended Tools, and then click on Wwise. This will take you to a site where if you click on Download, if you don't have a Wwise account, it's going to ask you to sign in or create a new account. So just go ahead and create a new account. And then once you verify it, come back to this site and sign in. But then when you click on Download Audio Kinetic Launcher, it's going to download the file for you when you are actually signed in. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up this executable file. Say yes and agree. And once this is installed, you'll get this launcher. Let's go to Projects, Create New Wwise Project. So here we're going to not want to install the latest version. You want to go down here where it says install a new version, and this drop down, select all instead of latest. And then in the major version, find 2022.1. And within this version down here, you can install 8. I personally have 22.1.11, so I know this works. So I'll recommend using this. In my case, it says already installed. So as you would see this little install button here, click on that. Oop, never mind. We got to log in. So in here, we really only want authoring and nothing else. It comes with Windows by default, or it does not. So let's go ahead and select Windows, or just Microsoft. Should be fine. And then next. That's fine. Yes, I agree for you to sell my information. Perfect. And to see if this worked, just go ahead and click on Launch Wwise. We don't have a project, so it's probably going to ask us to create one, or rather keep accepting agreements. There we go. Yeah, why not? Yep. So just create a new project. This doesn't matter at all what you call it. I'm just going to call it Test Project. Click OK. So yeah, when we run this in trial mode, it's going to limit us to 200 media assets, which we're not going to worry about how many assets we can use. The only thing we are going to use Wwise for is to convert audio files back and forth from the .wem extension to .wave and vice versa. So the limit of 200 media assets means nothing to us because we can do it 10 at a time, 100 at a time, 1 at a time, whatever we choose, and it's not going to matter. So that's fine. So there's a couple more settings we want to set up in here. So first go to Project and then go down to Project Settings. There we go. And then in the Source Settings tab, we want to click on these little 3 dots here. And then expand this factory conversion setting and then go to Vorbis. So just do Vorbis Auto Detect High, which is right here. And say OK. And that should be enough for now. We're going to go ahead and save the project to make sure our settings are saved, and we can close it. And we will come back to this here in a bit when we are ready to convert some WAV files over into the PEM format and put them into the game. So let's actually go and modify a texture. One example that we could use is changing the texture of the knife. If we open up Fmodel, assuming that we are wanting to go in and make our own little custom knife, let's just go ahead and search for knife. And you can see we have quite a bit of results. But when you're going through Fmodel, I mean, sometimes you look and there's probably about 100 results here. We know we're looking for a knife texture. So a lot of these game files are organized in such a way that you can look at some of these and say, okay, well, I know I don't care about audio, so we can most likely ignore those for the purposes of changing texture. Skeletal mesh is more along the lines of what we want, but it's not an interactable. Knife switch, I actually don't even know what this is. Maybe we just look at it to find out. So, yeah, just double click on this. And I know this isn't it, but I also don't know what this is. Oh, that's a knife switch? Well, that's not what we're looking for. So let's keep trying. Let's go back to search. It's not a cutscene. It is a weapon. So here we go. Yeah, weapon, skeletal mesh, and weapons, knife. There it is. So yeah. So here we got texture in here. So this is what we are looking for. Let's go ahead and open up this texture. And we can see when we look at these 3 texture files, there's a D, an N, and an RMA. So this is default, normal, and I forget what this one is. But really what we are going to be concerned with is the D for default. So if we double click on that, I don't know if that's too easy to see, so I'll make it a little bit larger. What we have here is the texture for the knife. And I know glancing at this, it probably doesn't look like a knife. This is what's called a UV map. And the best way to think of a texture UV map is imagine the foil wrapping for like a Easter Bunny chocolate or any other chocolate that has a shape to it. If you unwrap that chocolate and you take the tinfoil wrapper and you spread it flat on a surface, it's going to look different when it's spread out flat versus when it's actually wrapped around a 3D object like the shape of a chocolate. And that's essentially what a UV map is. So this texture is going to get wrapped around the 3D model or skeleton or skeletal mesh for whatever object is going to be using this texture. As we go along, it'll probably be a little bit easier to understand when we're actually looking at the 3D model and this UV map texture at the same time. But for now, we could edit this directly and do nothing else. Let's say we wanted to do something as simple as just, remove this symbol or change the words at the bottom or the base of the knife. We can do that without and understand what it's going to look like without actually wrapping this on the model itself. But let's go through the process of actually getting the skeletal mesh and the UV map and editing them at the same time and see what that looks like. I know I'm going to need this texture, so go ahead and right-click on T.G.R.A. knife DU asset and go to Save Texture. And after a little bit, you're going to see down here in the output log window that you have, it'll say successfully saved, and there's a link. So you can click on this to make it easier on yourself. And it'll open up a window over here where we have our texture. So we want to put this into our project. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this for now. Minimize F model. We're going to go back to our Unreal project and open up that Stalker 2 project that we set up earlier. Let's quickly go over the user interface here. In making mods, I don't think I have ever used the Place Actors dialog window, so I would recommend just closing that. The outliner, we'll get into those later. So for now, I'll just kind of minimize it, but we will use it in some later tutorials. So what you're particularly going to want to use and look at for modifying textures, you're not even really going to use the window here. This is just, temporary test content here. We're not really going to be concerned with any of this stuff here. We're just going to be, modifying a texture and then, seeing how it looks. So for the most part, we're really only going to be concerned with the content browser down here, which represents the file structure of our project. And probably the best way to understand the relationship between the project and its file structure and the game file structure is to look at this side by side with F-model. So this represents the game's project root folder. This would be the equivalent on the right if we look at, Stalker 2. This and this are going to be referring to the same project name in different places. So this is the actual game's project files, which is going to contain a lot more than our project. And then in our project, we have, all content. If we expand Stalker 2, we see we have content. So this content and this content are going to be referring to the same, relative location in different places. So whenever we go in, now that we want to add the knife texture rather, is at this following path. So Stalker 2 content underscore Stalker underscore 2, weapons, knife, and then SK for skeletal. I don't know what GRA stands for, but then knife and textures. In order for whatever texture that we create, in order for it to end up in the right place in our mod so that it can end up in the right place in the game, we have to mimic what we are observing for the assets and their location within the game file structure within our own project structure. So whenever we're going to import this, we have to emulate the path that the game uses to store that texture. I'm going to expand content, and we don't have a folder called underscore Stalker underscore 2, so I need to create it. There we go. And then we know we just created that, so that's empty directory. So we're obviously not going to have weapons and then knife, etc. So let's go ahead and create all the subfolders that are required. There we go. So now we have Stalker 2, weapons, knife, SK underscore GRA underscore knife, textures. So now we can go ahead and import that TGRA knife D asset that we downloaded previously. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag that from File Explorer over into this textures folder that we created. It'll go ahead and import it for us, and then we are done with that part. So the last thing we need to look at for this texture is whether it is or is not a virtual texture. So if I minimize the preview window and I look at the properties for this file, we can see that we have a property down here that says virtual texture streaming is true. Whenever you see this for a texture, that means that just having the raw texture down here is not enough. We have to right click on it and then convert to virtual texture. In the window down here where we're converting it, it's going to ask us what the size threshold is. If we look at the properties in UModel, we can see that this imported size is 2048 pixels by 2048 pixels. Virtual textures are always going to be in powers of 2, meaning the size is going to be 2 by 2, 8 by 8, 16 by 16, 124 by 124, etc. So we can see here that it is 2048. So that's what we're going to select over here, and then click on Apply Filter. Make sure that it's still there, because if we get it too high, it'll go away. So yeah, Apply Filter, make sure we can still see it, and then press OK. And if everything was successful in our texture asset down here, we should see in the bottom right-hand corner that we have this VT indicator that's telling us it is actually a virtual texture. So the next thing we want to do is find the model that this texture wraps around. So i.e. we need to find the skeletal mesh or skeleton for the knife. So let's go ahead and find that. So we're going to go back into UModel, and let's see if we're lucky enough to where it's going to be in the one folder up. That's a static mesh. Doesn't look like we are, so let's go ahead and search for it. So SK knife. Okay. This is the object we want right here. SK knife. Let's just double. Yep, that looks good to me. So let's download that by, actually, before we do that, go to Settings, and under Settings, go to Model. The default, I believe, is UE format for mesh format. Go ahead and change that to GLTF so that we get a format that we can import into the Unreal Engine editor. And so now just right-click on this SK knife, say Save Model, and then now we have the model saved. Look at the path to the, because we couldn't find it before, so we got STALKER2 content underscore STALKER 2 with no underscore between the R and the 2. So that skeletal meshes, weapons, knives, and knife. So that's the folder structure we're going to have to create in our project in order to load this guy in properly. So we're going to create a new folder. We're going to mimic this path over here. So underscore STALKER 2. Skeletal meshes. Weapons. Knives. Knife. What are knives? And knife. So let's get our actual GLB model object, drag that over into this folder, and now we're going to get this prompt window. I have not found a reason yet to argue with whatever Unreal feels is the default import properties. Just go ahead and click on import. It'll take a little bit, and then now we're going to see we have a few different things here. What we really want and are going to be concerned with here is the actual SK knife. When we hover over this, it says the object type. If we look at this window, the object type is a skeletal mesh. This one is a physics asset. This one is the skeleton. And this one is the material. This is the only one we're really going to be concerned with as far as texture modeling is going to be the skeletal mesh. So if we double click on that, it'll open it up in another window. We'll make it a little larger so that we can see. And now if we zoom in, we can see, yeah, we have this blank model with no texture. This just represents the 3D volume of this particular object. If I right click and hold down, I can use the WASD keys to move around this object and take a look at it. What we want to do now is modify the material instance so that it actually uses the correct, there's a linkage between that material instance and this texture object right here. So if we double click on this material instance, I'm going to make this full screen just so it's easier to see. When you're looking at this, you don't need to know what all of these do. All these material functions, like, they get more complicated than this, but the only thing you're really going to be worried about when it comes to UV maps is the base color. This isn't hooked up to our texture, so we want to go ahead and delete this default base color because that's what's making it white. And we want to right click and just type in texture and just do texture sample and connect up this RGBA pin over to base color. And then over here on the left where we have texture, click on this drop down here, and this is where we want to hook up that texture file that we brought in earlier. So I believe the name for it was T_GR something a knife, right? Okay, yeah, there we go. So click on that, and now we get a preview of that UV map down here in this node. We have the output for its red, green, blue, and alpha channels mapping to the base color of the knife material instance model. And we can also see it's very lazily wrapped around this little circle object. Save this, apply and save rather. Now let's go back to our knife, and yep, this looks a lot better. So now we actually have what looks like a wrapped knife. Now that the material instance is saved, I'm going to close that, and I'm going to put this over here on the left. So now let's actually start to modify this knife. So I'm going to get it into frame where we can kind of see enough detail but not clip into it. And for this part, we're actually not going to use the Unreal Engine to modify it. We're going to use basically any photo editor that you want to modify the texture file. So I personally use GIMP, but you can use Adobe Photoshop. You can even use MS Paint if you really wanted to. So yeah, I'm going to open up GIMP, put it over here on the right so that I can still see the actual model. And then I'm going to go open, and then we're going to find that original texture file that we downloaded from Fmodel. Textures, and there it is. Open up that guy. And so in here, we can modify this UV map as a picture. Just to give you an example, we'll just do an airbrush. Make a bunch of pink lines, who cares, right? Just to show you something's going to update whenever we save this. Or save it, and however your photo editor is going to save the changes back to the actual picture file itself. We can see nothing changed yet, and that's because we actually have to tell Unreal to re-import the picture again. Right-click on the actual texture, and then click on re-import. And so now we're going to see that we have a bunch of little weird squigglies all around our knife. So I'm going to get rid of the squigglies. Let's just say we want to change the color of this knife. So I'm going to go to color balance, just mess around with some things. See if we can find any combination that stands out. All right, we'll just test this out. Nice like blue and yellow combination here. Okay, it looks different enough where we should recognize that in the game. So let's go ahead and save this texture. For a texture replacement mod, the only thing we're really need to put into the game is the actual UV map itself. We literally only need to package this one UV map texture file. So for wherever we're going to have files that we want to be included and packaged in our mod, we're going to right click in those folders and add an asset, which is going to be under miscellaneous, and it's going to be called data asset. And under here, you're going to want to choose the primary asset label. I'm going to call it PAL for primary asset label, and then just call this blue knife, doesn't matter. Double click on it, and over here on the left, priority, I'm just going to set that to anything above 1. The chunk ID, this we're going to set to any number between 1,000 and 10,000. Doesn't particularly matter, and the only time you ever have to mess with this is if there is any issue loading your mod. You basically just want to make sure that this chunk ID is not going to be the same as any chunk ID that the game uses. So I'm just going to pick some random number, and then under cook rule, I'm going to say always cook and label assets in my directory. So once that's done, I'm going to save. And then we're actually going to start 2 steps that are important for packaging our mod. Go to platforms, Windows, cook content. Little cooking indicator will end up on the bottom right hand corner of your Unreal Engine editor. This can take a long time, especially the first time that you cook a project. So you can click on the show output and it'll show you what it's doing and what step it's on. I'll see you whenever this is done cooking. The last thing we need to do after we cook is to go to package and just put it into your Stalker 2 directory. That's fine. This one should not take as long as the cooking step. And when that is complete, let's just jump directly to the containing folder for our project. So just right click on anything within our mod and then choose the option Show in Explorer. And this will open up File Explorer for our project. You're going to see something that says Unreal Projects and then Stalker 2. And then we see we now have this Windows folder. If we open up that Windows folder, this is what was just packaged. Then we go under Stalker 2, Content, and Packs, and then find the pack chunk that is suffixed by the number that we picked whenever we saved our primary asset label. So I picked 7452. Select all 3 of these, not just the pack, but you're going to need the .ucas and the .utoc. So all 3 of these, I'm going to copy those, and we're going to put that into our game's mod directory. Stalker 2 content packs tilde mods, which is where we put our normal mod files. Technically, this will run, but it will not replace the knife texture unless we do a couple things. We need to change the name of these 3 files. So I have all 3 of them highlighted. If you press the F2 key while multiple files are highlighted, you can actually rename all of them at the same time. So I am going to pick a pattern that starts with Z underscore, and then whatever the mod name is going to be, and then underscore P. So basically, pattern we're going to use for pretty much any texture, audio, or any asset replacement mod is to preface your mod with Z underscore, and this will ensure that it's more likely to be loaded after the regular game files are loaded. And since our texture is meant to replace something in the game, we don't want it to load before the game's normal texture because it'll overwrite what we put in our mod. And then the underscore P is just an indicator to Unreal that this is a patch file, basically a file that should be loaded towards the end of the load stack. So I'm just going to call this blue knife. And with that done, we can open the game and see if our knife now looks different. Well, that definitely looks different. Kind of has a ultraviolet look to it. See if I can get a better angle. There we go. Yeah, trippy. All right, so let's start doing some sound replacement in the game. I'm going to use, for example, replacing blind dog bark sound effects. So we're going to look in F-Model and under underscore Stalker 2, audio, Wwise, events, and mutants, blind dog. We see we have two folders. So the bark's going to be under voice. And we have two different sets of sound effect groups. There's going to be bark combat and bark. So we'll look at replacing both of these. So I'm going to open up bark, for example. If we look at this media property, we have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 different audio files here. So the first thing I'm going to do is copy all of these media IDs, which represent the Wwise encrypted version of the original WAV files, so that we can download all of them and take a listen to what they sound like. Opening up a notepad, and then just start the arduous process of copying them one by one. Okay, so that is the regular bark. So let's copy the ones from bark combat as well. We're actually seeing a lot of these of the same number. That does happen sometimes. In fact, I just looked into the exact same thing. So that's nice. So that means we only have to replace these 12, because it seems that there is no difference in the original sound files between the actual WAV files. Most likely the difference between bark and bark combat is going to be some other audio modifier. A couple things when we're looking at audio, especially if we're going to replace it, is going to be the minimum and maximum duration. When we are replacing audio files in the game, we want to make sure that we stay within whatever this constraint is. So in bark combat, it's 0 to 1.4 seconds. In bark, it is 1.25 to 1.4. So let's just stay within 1.25 to 1.4. So I'm going to copy that so I don't forget. And now we want to search for all of these. I'm going to copy all of this and then put them all on one line separated by a pipe. There we go. Highlight this entire line. I'm going to move this window off to the left, then go to Packages and Search. Paste this in, make sure that regular expression search is turned on, and then there we go. So now we're going to open up all of these files in a single instance of the F-Model media player. Go through each one of these individually, right-click on them, and say Extract a new tab. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and pause that for now because I don't want that to keep looping while I am searching. Go back to search. The shortcut key is Control-Shift-F. I'm going to go to the next one, extract a new tab, Control-Shift-F, and so on. So I'll see you here in a couple seconds after I have them all in this media player. So now that they're all in there, we can press play again and listen to them all. All right, so those are the 12 different slight variations of the bark. So let's go ahead and right-click on any of these and say Save Playlist. And this will take all 12 of these audio files and save them to our export directory. And then go to Exports, and it's going to be extracted into Content underscore Stalker 2 audio, Wwise audio, and it's going to be here under media. So I'm going to create a temporary folder on the desktop. Just going to call it Dog Barks. And I'm going to take these 12 files that I just exported and move them over there. And now I'm going to open up all these files in Audacity. You can download Audacity from audacityteam.org. Just download and run it. It's pretty simple. I'm just going to run it. Put this over here to the right. Open up my folder over here to the left. I'm just going to take all of these files and drag them into Audacity. And if it asks you about this BPM thing, just tell it no. We're not importing in music. Hold down Control and scroll out so I can see the ends of the file. Up here in the top, we have the time scale. So you can see these files are around 1.25-ish seconds long. They're all the exact same length. So now let's actually record some audio, and I don't believe I'm going to be able to do that while I am also recording my voice for the video. So I'll see you in a couple seconds when I get that recorded. So I have recorded a few lines of audio, and this is more or less how it sounds. Woof. Bark. Woof. 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 You get the idea. There's a bunch of those. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to cut those up into individual audio snippets. In order to do that in Audacity, click and drag and highlight a section. Click and drag and highlight this, and then use Control-I, which will make a cut right here. I'm going to skip the second one because it's going to automatically cut when I cut the third one. Do Control-I again, and keep going until I'm on the last. There we go. So now, in order to save all of these, I'm going to click on one of them and then hold down the Control key and press B. This will add in a label track where I can give each one of these a name. This is going to represent the file name that they get saved as. I'm just going to call them 1, 2, 3, and so on. All right, now that they are all labeled, I'm going to go up into the top and choose the export audio option. And the name of the file doesn't matter because down here in the middle, we're going to click on multiple files. And we're going to make sure that we split the files based on the labels using the label and track name. And then I'm going to tell it where I want it to save as. So I'm going to go to that folder I have on the desktop. Dog barks. There we go. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it Placement Sounds. That's where I'm going to save all these. Now click on Export. It's going to verify the different files it's going to create. Just say OK. And now we're done with this guy. You can save it or you can close. I'm just going to close. So now let's start to bring in the replacement sounds. So I'm going to start off with one. So I'm just going to drag this over here. And it'll end up at the bottom. And there's a couple things that we want to try to do whenever we're replacing audio. One, make sure the general profile is the same, like where the sound exists. It looks like these barks typically exist between 0.2 and 0.5 seconds. So we're going to take our audio file down here, and we're going to just hold and move it down to where it's in roughly the same area. The second thing is we notice that it's a little bit longer than the rest of the audio files, which are around 1.25, 1.24-ish in that area. So we can actually, if we hover over the end, we see this yellow line telling us that this is snapping to a certain point in time. In this case, it's the end of all these files. So if I go towards the part of this file that is around the same time as the end of all the others, I get that yellow line. If I then click and hold and then drag out to the right to select everything from the end of these files down, I'm highlighting the end of this file. I can click delete, and now I have the same length as the other ones. The next thing we notice is that the amplitude of, or volume, is much higher than our imported. So if we click on this guy and then this little solo, we don't want to press play right now because it'll play all of our sound effects at the same time. So I'm just going to click on solo, which will play only the file we have selected or activated as solo, and press play. Woof. So if we compare that to the one right above it, it's a little bit louder. So we can actually see that it goes to right around just above -3 decibels is its max amplitude or volume. So I am going to click on this file. In order to fix that, there is an effect under volume and compression called normalize. And you can tell it what you want the normalized peak amplitude to be. -3, we're going to use that. And then you can see that looks a little bit more of the profile of the original bark. So we're done with modifying this guy right now. So all we have to do is rename this track to whatever we want it to save whenever we export. I'm going to call it the name of the first. I'm going to go in order. Doesn't particularly matter, but I'm going to go to rename track up here, and I'm going to copy just the number. And I'm going to go back to our file that we edited, and I'm going to rename this to just that number. There you go. Now, since when we export, I don't want the original one, because I already have it, I'm just going to close that. And they're going to move on to the next one. So we're going to do this for all the different sound effects, and I will see you in a couple seconds whenever I have that done. So I have them all renamed, and I deleted the originals. So last thing I'm going to do, click on the first track, hold down Shift, click on the last track so they're all selected, and then go to Effect, and I can just do Repeat Normalize to do the normalize for -3 decibel peak. And so every one of these should have a peak of -3. So I'm just going to test on one of them down here, just to make sure that's the case. Bark. Yep, there we go. So the last step is to make sure that nothing is highlighted with mute or solo, and then we're going to export all of these. So export audio, multiple files, and this time we're going to use tracks instead of labels, and then click on export. It's going to verify the names of the files. So we're going to say OK. We can save or close this. I'm just going to close it. This is not something I'm going to edit again, but if it was a mod, I would recommend saving this Audacity project so that if you do need to make a change, you can open it back up and re-export it. I don't care, so I am not going to save the project. Whatever it is what I'm going with. Highlight on all of them and say, play with Media Player just to make sure they sound okay. Woof, 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 bark, bark, woof. Sounds good to me. All right. So these are still WAV files. The last step is to use Wwise to convert these to the WEM format. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. We're going to start by opening up the Wwise launcher and then going to that test project that we set up earlier. Open in Wwise. And once it's loaded, go into Project and Import Audio Files. Click on Add Files, and then go to the desktop, dog barks. We're just going to select all of these. Well, actually, excuse me. We're going to go to Replacement Sounds. We're going to select all the ones that have the longer numbers, the ones that we created with Audacity. I'm going to say OK. And they should all be sound effects, but if you do see voice, this changes the sound effect, but it generally does a pretty good job of figuring it out. So now click on Import, go into Project, and Convert All Audio Files. Make sure it has Windows selected and say Convert. Good to go. And then when that's done, go to File Manager, and then right-click on this project folder, say Open Containing Folder. This will open up File Explorer, and open up Cache, and Windows, SFX, and we should see our 12 files right here. I am going to copy those. So I went ahead and created a final folder within our desktop dog barks. So in here, we are going to place a folder that's called whatever we're going to call it. I'm just saying dog bark mod. And then the path to the Audio Kinetic Audio Media folder, which is under STALKER 2, Content, underscore stalker2 audio, Wwise audio, and finally media. This is what we want it to end up looking like. Is these just the media ID that we saw in fmodel and a .wem. However, in the cache file, we saw that it put this underscore 10c4, and it'll be different for you, assuredly. This is randomly generated. So essentially, you just want to copy these files, paste them over, and then remove that underscore whatever random number it generated before it does the .wem. Once we have this all set up, I am going to put this on a window to the side, and then open up our Unreal Pack to the other side. Because now what we want to do is we want to go all the way back to our final folder. And this dog Bork mod folder is the one that contains Stalker 2 and then all the subsequent directories, and finally the 12 audio files that we want to replace. So I want to take that dog Bork mod folder, drag it over the batch file for Unreal Pack with compression. And after a little bit, we'll see we have our dogborkmod.pack. So we can create that and put it into our games mod directory. But first, we want to rename this, just like we did with our texture pack earlier. We want to preface it with a Z, and then end it with a underscore P, Z underscore, and then a P underscore. So whatever our mod name is, sandwiched in between Z underscore and P underscore. So now this is ready to put into our mod, our tilde mods directory, and then see if it works. Got any dogs? Woof. Really? Bark. Sounds pretty disinterested. Bark. 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 Whoa. It's so dumb. Okay. We'll call that one a win. In closing here, we're going to talk a little about the MachoSucker mod. And I originally wanted to dedicate a little bit more time to this mod, but as I've made this video, I realized I covered 99% of everything that you would need to know in order to basically do everything I did to make this guy look like this and sound like he does with the quotes and everything. There are a couple unique aspects about at least editing this particular model versus the knife model. If you remember in the knife model, it had one 248 by 248 pixel texture UV map, whereas the Bloodsucker actually has 3. So whereas our knife texture was one 2048 by 2048 square, this guy, if we look over here, it's actually 12,000 by 4,000. So this is actually made up of 3 4096 by 4096 pictures. So in order to get those to act as though they are one texture file in the game, so here we can see my source files, we have 3 different pictures. However, when we look at the Unreal Engine, you can see it actually treats it as a rectangle of 3 images. It's only one thing. We're not seeing the individual pictures in here. How do we get from 3 separate pictures to a single virtual texture, if you look at the bottom of this description here, that is a combination of 3 different files? Well, one thing you may notice if you look close enough is that every single one of these source files has an extra number at the end in between the name and the file type, which is PNG in this case. So we have a bloodsucker texture dot 1001.png. We have a bloodsucker texture dot 1002 PNG and 1003 PNG. Whenever you have a texture that is loaded in and it contains dot 1000 something dot and then a image extension, Unreal Engine will automatically group those together into a combined virtual texture UV map. The overall location of where they're going to be is going to be dependent on the number. So 1001 followed by 1002 followed by 1003 and so on, and then eventually we get to 1010, which would be the row up, and so on. There is an upper limit, but it's a lot. So you can essentially make a composite virtual texture, which is what the game uses for many of the larger models, such as the Sucker, Chimera, etc. And one other benefit to using virtual textures where the files are imported directly is that if you make an edit, and I'll go back to GIMP here, we could have done this with a knife, but I chose to do the faster, more clear method. But if we go in here, if you remember in the knife, when we did the texture edits on the knife, we had to re-import the image every time we made a change. When we're using a virtual texture based off of that loading method of the dot 1001, dot 1002, 1003, and so on, dot PNG or whatever, and that file that we're targeting to replace is inside of our project, then it'll actually update automatically. So for example, if I wanted to go in here and just remove the sunglasses and then export this again. So first, GIMP is going to save this image, and once it is saved, it'll take about 5 or so seconds, and then Unreal will realize that something has changed and it'll update the model, as we saw that just happened. If I wanted to put it back in and maybe take out the bandana, and then I'm just going to do the shortcut for export, Control E to re-export it. So I can make changes relatively quickly and then see what they look like while not having to leave my image editing program, which is very convenient if you're making really small changes, especially like if you want to see where certain changes that you're making, where it's actually going to be shown on the model itself. So the last thing I will share here, let me put the model back to the way it was. A lot of the edits that I made, just like to make the hands or have the like the sweatbands, all it really is just me going in and selecting parts of the UV map and then filling it in with a certain color. I knew I threw some shoelaces in here and feathered it in a bit. But yeah, this is basically it. Just going in here and just drawing something over part of the original mesh in order to make it look however I want to inside the game itself. For figuring out where or what parts of certain UV maps affect what part of the model, like you can just go in and just make a little squiggly over here, see what it looks like in the game. Or alternatively, you can go into the Unreal Engine. I'm going to go to the content drawer. Then I'm going to go to where this skeletal mesh exists, which is right here. And it can actually right-click on this guy and then go to UV Editor. This will open up kind of an X-ray mode for our UV map. I'll zoom out a bit so we can see everything. There we go. So if we click on any of these sections here, and we're not really zoomed in all that good, I'm going to change the rendering to just be unlit because it's probably going to be a little easy. Actually, you know what? Wireframe might be the best way to look at it. Yeah, let's just do wireframe. If we wanted to see where a particular section of the UV map affects the model, this might be one of the most comprehensive ways to look at it. I can kind of tell by glancing this is the hands, but let's say I don't know what this is. You can just click on it, And when it's highlighted over here, you'll see on the 3D model what that represents. So now I'm looking at it. I'm going to go into camera move mode, excuse me. So I can kind of move around a little easier. So we can see that is part of the arm. So it's basically the whole arm. It's from the top of the shoulder to the wrist. That's what that looks to be. We can do the same thing over here, and that's going to be the other arm on the other side. If we don't know what this is, that looks like it's the back, and yes, it is. So that's another way you can kind of figure out where certain UV models or UV map areas are going to translate to on the actual body of the model that you are editing. Okay, yeah, so that was a long video, huh? So I imagine that in the next series of videos, where we're going to go from here is we're going to move on to logic mods and specifically making and designing blueprint mods. Probably going to be broken up into 30-minute videos here going forward. I don't really want to be putting out these hour-long videos. Probably not easy to watch, and they're definitely not easy for me to edit. As we go forward, we'll probably be breaking up the concepts of blueprint modding into like basic, intermediate, advanced, and then, you know, tips and tricks, and potentially going over some of the blueprint mods that I have already created, how I did it, and some suggestions on how to do some things yourself. With that, I do appreciate you. If you've watched all 3 of the videos so far, I've dominated 2 hours of your life. So for that, I apologize. Have a good one, and hope to see you in the next video.